Emma stood before a colt who had been abandoned to starve in chains, a creature so traumatized he lunged at anyone who came near. She whispered something no one else had thought to say, and the impossible began. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The morning sun barely penetrated the thick dust that hung in the air around the old barn at the edge of Millbrook County. The structure had seen better days, its wooden beams weathered by decades of storms and neglect, its paint long since peeled away to reveal the gray skeleton beneath. But it wasn't the barn itself that drew the attention of those who passed by on the rural road. It was the sound that came from within, a sound that made even the most hardened ranchers shake their heads in pity and move along, unwilling to get involved in what they considered a lost cause. Inside that barn, chained to a rusted post in the corner, stood a young colt whose spirit had been nearly broken by months of isolation and mistreatment. His coat, which should have gleamed with the rich copper tones of his Mustang bloodline, was matted with dirt and neglect. Scars crisscrossed his flanks, evidence of the heavy hand of his previous owner. A man named Pike, who had acquired the wild horse at an auction with dreams of breaking him for profit. Pike had tried everything, whips, ropes, even starvation, but the colt had refused to submit. In the end, Pike had simply chained him in the barn and left him there, too stubborn to sell him and too cruel to set him free. The colt had lost track of how long he had been there. Days blended into nights and nights into days. The only constants were hunger, thirst, and the heavy iron chain that kept him tethered to that single spot. His world had shrunk to a circle no more than 6 feet in diameter, a prison defined by the length of his restraints. He had tried to break free in those first weeks, throwing his weight against the chain until his neck was raw and bleeding. But the chain never broke, and eventually he stopped trying. The fire that had once burned in his eyes, the wild defiance that defined his breed, had dimmed to barely more than embers. The people of Millbrook knew about the colt. Some had reported Pike to the authorities, but in a county where livestock laws were loosely enforced and Pike had friends in the right places, nothing had come of it. Others had offered to buy the horse, hoping to give him a better life. But Pike refused every offer out of pure spite. He would rather let the animal suffer than admit defeat. So the colt remained, a ghost in a forgotten barn, waiting for an end that never seemed to come. Then one morning, everything changed. The change came not with thunder or drama, but with the soft footsteps of a child. Emma Margaret Hayes was 8 years old, with blonde hair that fell straight down her back like strands of gold silk, and eyes the color of a summer sky. She lived with her grandmother, Martha, in a small farmhouse about half a mile down the road from Pike's property. Emma's parents had died in a car accident 2 years earlier, and she had come to live with Martha, bringing with her a sadness that seemed too heavy for such small shoulders to carry. Emma rarely spoke anymore. The trauma of losing her parents had locked something away inside her, and no amount of therapy or gentle coaxing from her grandmother could bring it back. She went through her days in silence, helping with chores, attending school, existing but not really living. Martha watched her granddaughter with a breaking heart, wondering if the bright, laughing child she had known would ever return. That particular morning, Emma had wandered further from home than usual. She often took walks alone, finding in the quiet countryside a companion to her own silence. She had never ventured onto Pike's property before, but something drew her there that day. Perhaps it was curiosity about the old barn she could see from the road, or perhaps it was something deeper, some invisible thread connecting two broken souls. Whatever the reason, she found herself pushing through the overgrown weeds and ducking under the sagging fence that marked the boundary of Pike's land. The barn door was partially open, hanging crooked on broken hinges. Emma hesitated at the entrance, her small hand resting on the weathered wood. The smell that drifted out was not pleasant, a mixture of rot, waste, and despair. But beneath it all, she detected something else, the warm, earthy scent of horse. Emma loved horses. Before the accident, her father had taken her riding every weekend at a local stable. Those memories were among the few that could still bring a flicker of emotion to her face. She stepped inside, waiting for her eyes to adjust to the dimness. At first, she saw nothing but shadows and dust motes dancing in the thin beams of light that penetrated the gaps in the walls. Then, in the far corner, she saw him. The Colt stood perfectly still, his head lowered, his entire body emanating defeat. The chain around his neck glinted dully in the half-light. For a moment, Emma and the Colt simply stared at each other across the dusty expanse of the barn floor. What Emma saw in that moment would stay with her for the rest of her life. She saw an animal that had been hurt, abandoned, and forgotten. She saw a creature that had once been wild and free, now reduced to a shadow of what it was meant to be. But more than that, she saw herself. In the Colt's hollow eyes, she recognized her own pain, her own sense of being trapped in a life she never asked for. And in that recognition, something shifted inside her. The Colt, for his part, had learned to fear humans. Every person who had entered this barn had brought pain or indifference. He had stopped hoping for kindness long ago. But this small figure was different. She made no sudden movements, carried no whip, spoke no harsh words. She simply stood there, and in her eyes he saw something he had not seen in a very long time. He saw someone who understood. Emma took a careful step forward, her small feet barely making a sound on the dirt floor. The Colt's ears flicked toward her, the first sign of awareness he had shown in weeks. She could see now how thin he was, his ribs visible beneath his matted coat, his legs trembling slightly from weakness. The chain around his neck had rubbed the hair away, leaving raw patches of skin that made Emma's heart ache. She had seen suffering before. She had sat beside hospital beds and stood at gravesides. She knew what loss looked like, what abandonment felt like, but seeing this beautiful creature reduced to such a state ignited something in her that had been dormant since the accident. It was anger, yes, but it was also determination. Someone had to help him. Someone had to care. And if no one else would, then she would. Emma moved closer, slowly, her hand extended in a gesture of peace. The Colt watched her approach with wary eyes, his muscles tensing as if preparing to bolt, though the chain made such escape impossible. Every instinct told him to rear back, to show his teeth, to warn this human away. But something in the girl's gentle approach, in the softness of her movements, gave him pause. She stopped just beyond his reach, respecting the invisible boundary of his fear. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Emma noticed the way his nostrils flared with each breath, the way his dark eyes held depths of intelligence and pain. She had read once that horses could sense human emotions, that they could feel fear and love and sadness. Looking at this Colt now, she believed it. He could see into her just as surely as she could see into him. Then Emma did something that surprised even herself. She began to hum. It was a song her mother used to sing to her at bedtime, a simple melody that spoke of sunshine and meadows and peaceful dreams. The sound was soft and tentative at first, barely more than a whisper of music, but it filled the empty spaces of the barn with something that had been absent for too long. It filled it with hope. The Colt's ears rotated forward, capturing the sound. No one had ever sung to him before. The gentle vibration of the girl's voice seemed to reach past his fear, past his pain, touching something deep within him that remembered what it was like to feel safe. His trembling began to ease, and though he did not move toward her, he did not move away either. Encouraged, Emma took another small step forward. She was close enough now to see the individual scars on his body, to smell the sour scent of his unwashed coat, to hear the rattle of the chain with each slight movement. She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out an apple, slightly bruised from bouncing around during her walk. It was meant to be her snack, but looking at the Colt's gaunt frame, she knew he needed it more. She held the apple out on her flat palm, the way her father had taught her years ago at the stables. The Colt's nostrils flared wider, catching the sweet scent of the fruit. Hunger warred with caution in his mind. He had not eaten anything substantial in days, Pike having forgotten or simply not cared enough to provide regular meals. The apple represented not just food, but the possibility of kindness. Slowly, so slowly that Emma had to hold her breath, the Colt extended his neck. His lips, soft as velvet despite the harshness of his life, brushed against her palm as he took the apple. The contact sent a jolt through both of them, a connection that went beyond the simple exchange of food. Emma felt tears spring to her eyes, the first real emotion she had allowed herself to feel in months. The Colt, for his part, experienced something he thought he had lost forever. He experienced trust. As he chewed the apple, Emma noticed a bucket in the corner, tipped over and bone dry. Without thinking, she turned and ran from the barn, her legs carrying her as fast as they could back toward her grandmother's house. Martha was in the garden when Emma burst through the gate, her face flushed with exertion and something else, something that looked almost like life returning to her features. Emma grabbed the garden hose and filled an old bucket, struggling with its weight as she carried it back across the field. Martha watched in confusion and concern, following her granddaughter at a distance to see where she was going. When she saw Emma disappear into Pike's barn, her heart sank. She knew about the Colt, knew about Pike's cruelty, and she knew that getting involved would mean trouble. But when Martha reached the barn door and looked inside, what she saw stopped her in her tracks. Emma, her silent, withdrawn granddaughter, was kneeling beside the chained Colt, holding the bucket of water as he drank deeply. More than that, Emma was talking to him. The words were soft and indistinct, but they were words nonetheless. Emma was speaking for the first time in nearly a year. Martha felt tears roll down her weathered cheeks as she watched the scene unfold. She understood immediately what was happening. This broken animal and her broken granddaughter had found in each other something that no therapist, no well-meaning relative, no amount of time could provide. They had found understanding. They had found purpose. They had found a reason to heal. The Colt drained the bucket, and then, in a gesture that made both Emma and Martha gasp, he lowered his head and gently nuzzled the girl's shoulder. It was a gesture of gratitude, of acceptance, of the beginning of something precious and rare. Emma wrapped her small arms around his neck, pressing her face against his dirty coat, and whispered words that only he could hear. Words about pain and loneliness and the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. The days that followed brought a transformation that seemed almost miraculous to those who witnessed it. Every morning before school, Emma would slip away to the barn with food and water for the Colt. She brought carrots from Martha's garden, apples from the trees behind their house, and once, a sugar cube she had saved from a restaurant. Each visit, the Colt grew more comfortable with her presence, and each visit, Emma spoke a little more. She told him about her parents, about the rainy night when the car had skidded off the road, about the unbearable silence that had filled her world ever since. She told him about the nightmares that still woke her, about the guilt she felt for surviving when they had not, about the anger that burned inside her at a world that could be so cruel. And the Colt, in his silent way, listened. His dark eyes never left her face, and sometimes when her voice broke with emotion, he would step closer and rest his muzzle against her shoulder in a gesture of comfort. Martha watched this budding friendship with mixed emotions. She was overjoyed to see Emma coming back to life, to hear her voice again, to see purpose in her movements. But she was also deeply worried. Pike was not a man to be trifled with, and his property was not a place where Emma should be spending time. More than once, Martha had considered confronting him, demanding that he either care for the animal properly or surrender it. But Pike's reputation for violence kept her silent. Instead, she did what she could to support Emma's secret mission, packing extra food in her granddaughter's backpack and turning a blind eye to the disappearance of garden vegetables. The Colt, whom Emma had begun calling Thunder for the sound his hooves had once made when he ran free, was also changing. The regular food and water were helping him regain strength, and the human contact was healing wounds that went deeper than his physical scars. His coat, though still dirty, had begun to show hints of its former luster, where Emma had managed to brush away some of the grime with her hands. His eyes, once dull with despair, now showed alertness and even the faintest spark of hope. But the chain remained, no matter how much Emma wished it. No matter how many nights she lay awake thinking about it, she could not free Thunder from his bonds. The padlock that secured the chain was heavy and rusted but unbreakable, and she had no key. She had tried prying it open with a rock, had tried picking it with a hairpin the way she had seen in movies, but nothing worked. The chain remained, a constant reminder that Thunder's fate was not truly in her hands. 3 weeks into their secret friendship, disaster struck. Emma was in the barn after school, brushing Thunder's mane with her fingers and telling him about a particularly difficult math test when the barn door suddenly swung wide open. The late afternoon sun silhouetted a large figure in the doorway, and Emma's heart plummeted as she recognized Pike's hulking form. He stood there for a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the dimness, and when he finally saw Emma kneeling beside his horse, his face twisted with rage. "What the hell do you think you're doing on my property?" Pike's voice boomed across the barn, making Emma jump to her feet. Thunder, startled by the sudden noise and the presence of the man who had caused him so much pain, reared back as far as his chain would allow, his eyes rolling white with fear. Emma positioned herself between Pike and the Colt, her small body trembling, but her chin raised in defiance. "I was helping him," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper but steady. "He was hungry and thirsty, and you weren't taking care of him." Pike took several heavy steps into the barn, his boots kicking up dust with each footfall. His face was red with anger, and Emma could smell the sour scent of alcohol on his breath. "That horse is my property, and what I do with my property is none of your damn business," Pike snarled. "Now get off my land before I call the sheriff and have you arrested for trespassing." Emma's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She knew she should be afraid, knew that this man was dangerous, but all she could think about was Thunder, about the trust they had built, about the promise she had made to herself to protect him. "He's suffering," Emma said, louder now. "You've got him chained up with no shelter, barely any food or water. That's animal cruelty." Pike laughed, a harsh sound that held no humor. "Animal cruelty," he repeated mockingly. "You think anyone in this county cares about one worthless horse? I bought him fair and square, tried to break him, and he wouldn't cooperate. Far as I'm concerned, he can rot in this barn until he learns his place or dies, whichever comes first." The casualness with which Pike discussed Thunder's death made something snap inside Emma. All the grief she had been carrying, all the anger at the unfairness of the world, all the helplessness she had felt watching her parents die, it all came pouring out in that moment. She launched herself at Pike, her small fists pounding against his legs, her voice rising in a scream that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. You can't do this. He deserves better. Everyone deserves better," Emma cried, tears streaming down her face. Pike, taken aback by the sudden attack, grabbed Emma by the shoulders and held her at arm's length. For a moment, something that might have been shame flickered across his face as he looked down at this sobbing child, but it was quickly replaced by anger again. "Get out," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Get out now, and if I catch you here again, I'll do more than just call the sheriff." He released Emma with a shove that sent her stumbling backward. She caught herself against Thunder's side, and the Colt, despite his own fear, stood steady, supporting her weight. Emma looked up at Pike, then at Thunder, then back at Pike. In that moment, she made a decision that would change everything. She would not abandon Thunder. She could not. If no one else would help him, if the law would not protect him, then she would find another way. She did not know how yet, but she would find a way to set him free. Emma burst through the front door of her grandmother's house, her face flushed and tear-streaked, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Martha was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and she dropped the knife she had been using to chop vegetables the moment she saw her granddaughter's distress. Emma collapsed into Martha's arms, her whole body shaking with sobs that she had held back during her confrontation with Pike. "He found me," Emma managed to say between sobs. "Pike found me with Thunder, and he said he doesn't care if Thunder dies." Martha held her granddaughter tight, stroking her blonde hair and making soothing sounds, but inside her own heart was breaking. She had feared this moment would come, had known that Emma's secret visits could not continue indefinitely. Now the question was what to do about it. When Emma's sobs finally subsided into hiccups, Martha led her to the kitchen table and poured her a glass of water. Emma drank it slowly, her hands still trembling. Martha sat down across from her and took her small hands in her own weathered ones. "Tell me everything," Martha said gently. "Start from the beginning." So Emma did. She told her grandmother about the first day she had found Thunder, about the chain and the neglect, about the connection she had felt immediately with the suffering animal. She told her about the daily visits, the food and water she had brought, the way Thunder had begun to trust her. And she told her about Pike's threats, about his casual cruelty, about the fear she had seen in Thunder's eyes when the man appeared. Martha listened without interrupting, her expression growing more troubled with each detail. When Emma finished, Martha sat back in her chair and sighed deeply. "Baby, I understand why you did what you did," Martha said slowly. "That horse needs help. Anyone can see that. But Pike is a dangerous man, and you can't go back there. It's not safe." "But what about Thunder?" Emma pleaded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I can't just leave him there to die." "He trusts me, Grandma. I'm the only person who's shown him any kindness. If I abandon him now," she trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Martha saw the determination in her granddaughter's eyes, the fierce protectiveness that reminded her so much of Emma's mother. Sarah had been the same way, unable to turn her back on anyone or anything that needed help. It was a beautiful quality, but it was also one that could lead to heartbreak. Still, looking at Emma now, seeing life and purpose burning in her eyes for the first time since the accident, Martha knew she could not simply crush this spark. "All right," Martha said finally. "We're not going to abandon Thunder, but we're going to do this the right way. Tomorrow I'm going to make some calls. There are animal welfare organizations, people who deal with this kind of thing. We'll report Pike and let the authorities handle it." Emma shook her head vehemently. "I already told you people have tried that before. Pike has friends, nothing ever happens." Martha had to acknowledge that Emma was probably right. She had lived in Millbrook County her whole life, and she knew how things worked. Pike came from an old family, had connections, and the sheriff was his second cousin. Animal cruelty cases rarely went anywhere, especially when they involved livestock rather than pets. But she also knew they had to try something. "Then we make noise," Martha said, a plan beginning to form in her mind. "We make so much noise that it can't be ignored. We contact the newspapers, the television stations, anyone who will listen. We make Pike's treatment of that horse so public that his friends won't be able to protect him anymore." Emma's eyes widened with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Do you really think that would work?" Martha reached across the table and cupped her granddaughter's face in her hands. "Sweetheart, I don't know if it will work. But I know that doing nothing definitely won't work. And I know that you've found something worth fighting for. That's important. That's everything." So yes, we're going to try. We're going to fight for Thunder with everything we have. The next morning, Martha was on the phone before Emma even left for school. She called the local newspaper, the county animal control office, the state humane society, and even a television station 2 counties over. Most of the responses were discouraging. The newspaper said they would send someone out if they had time, but they made no promises. Animal control said they would add it to their list of properties to inspect, but that could take weeks. The Humane Society explained that they had no enforcement power and could only offer resources if the owner voluntarily surrendered the animal. But the television station, a small outfit always hungry for human interest stories, showed immediate interest. A producer named Lisa Martinez listened to Martha's description of Thunder's situation and Emma's connection to him, and she saw the potential for a compelling segment. She promised to send a camera crew out within the next few days. When Emma came home from school, Martha shared the mixed results of her calls. Emma's face fell at most of the news, but brightened when she heard about the television station. "Do you think they'll really come?" Emma asked. Martha nodded. "I think they will, and when they do, we need to be ready to show them everything. The problem is, we can't go back to Pike's property without permission. If we're caught trespassing again, it could hurt our case." Emma was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then her face took on a look of determination that was becoming familiar to Martha. "I have an idea," Emma said. "What if we invite them to come at a time when we know Pike won't be there? He goes to the bar every Friday night and doesn't come home until late. If the camera crew came then, we could show them Thunder's condition, and Pike would never know until it was too late." Martha considered this. It was risky, potentially illegal, and could backfire spectacularly. But looking at her granddaughter's hopeful face, thinking about the suffering animal chained in that barn, she found herself nodding. "We'll need to be careful," Martha said, "very careful. And we'll need to be quick, in and out before Pike has any chance of showing up." The plan was set. Lisa Martinez agreed to meet them at Pike's barn the following Friday evening at 7 o'clock, just after sunset, when Pike would be well into his drinking at the local tavern. Emma could barely concentrate on anything else in the days leading up to Friday. She wanted desperately to visit Thunder, to tell him that help was coming, but Martha had forbidden it. "Too risky," her grandmother said. "We can't do anything to jeopardize our chance to save him." So Emma waited, counting down the hours and praying that Thunder could hold on just a little longer. She lay awake at night imagining his rescue, imagining the moment when the chain would finally be removed and he would be free. She imagined him running across open fields, his mane flowing in the wind, the way he was meant to live, and she promised herself that no matter what it took, she would make that vision a reality. The white van with the television station's logo pulled up to Pike's property, just as twilight settled over the countryside. Lisa Martinez stepped out, followed by a cameraman named Tom and a young reporter named Jessica Chen. Emma, who had been waiting anxiously with Martha beside their own truck, felt her heart race as she watched the crew unload their equipment. This was really happening. Someone was finally going to see what she had been witnessing for weeks. Lisa approached them with a warm smile and shook Martha's hand. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention," Lisa said. "We've been looking for a story about animal welfare in rural areas, and this sounds like exactly what we need." She turned to Emma, kneeling down to be at eye level with the girl. "And you must be Emma. Your grandmother tells me you're the one who discovered this horse." Emma nodded, suddenly shy in front of these strangers with their cameras and official demeanor. "He's in the barn," she said quietly, pointing toward the sagging structure. "His name is Thunder. I've been taking care of him as best I could, but he's still chained up, and he needs real help." Jessica Chen pulled out a notebook and began scribbling notes, while Tom hoisted the camera onto his shoulder. They followed Emma and Martha toward the barn, their footsteps crunching on the gravel driveway. The property looked even more derelict in the fading light, with overgrown weeds and rusted equipment scattered about. It was clear that Pike had let the entire place fall into disrepair, not just the barn where Thunder was kept. As they approached the barn door, Emma felt a familiar flutter of nervousness. She had not seen Thunder in nearly a week, the longest they had been apart since their first meeting. What if his condition had worsened? What if Pike had taken out his anger on the Colt after catching Emma there? Her hands trembled as she pushed open the barn door. The smell hit them first, and Jessica wrinkled her nose in disgust. Tom turned on the camera's light, and the beam cut through the darkness to illuminate the far corner where Thunder stood. Emma heard Lisa's sharp intake of breath. Even for someone who had covered difficult stories before, the sight of the emaciated Colt was shocking. Thunder raised his head when the light hit him, and Emma's heart broke all over again. If anything, he looked worse than the last time she had seen him. His ribs were even more pronounced, and there were fresh sores on his legs where he had been standing in his own waste. But when his eyes found Emma in the group, something changed in his expression. His ears perked forward, and he took a tentative step in her direction, only to be pulled up short by the chain. "Emma," Lisa said softly, "why don't you go to him? Show us the relationship you've built." Emma did not need to be asked twice. She walked quickly across the barn floor, her voice rising in a gentle call. "Thunder, it's me. I'm here. I'm sorry it took so long." The Colt nickered softly, a sound of recognition and relief. When Emma reached him, he immediately lowered his head and pressed his muzzle against her shoulder just as he always did. It was their greeting, their way of saying we understand each other. Tom moved closer with the camera, capturing the tender moment between the young girl and the suffering animal. Jessica was asking Martha questions in the background about how long Emma had been coming here, what condition Thunder had been in when she first found him, what attempts had been made to help him through official channels. Martha answered each question carefully, making sure to emphasize that they had tried working within the system before resorting to this. Meanwhile, Emma had pulled an apple from her pocket, one she had been saving all week for this moment. Thunder took it eagerly, and she stroked his neck as he ate, murmuring words of comfort. The camera captured it all, the contrast between the innocent child and the neglected animal, the obvious bond they shared, the deplorable conditions in which Thunder was being kept. Lisa walked the perimeter of Thunder's small world, documenting the length of his chain, the lack of clean water, the absence of adequate shelter. She took photographs with her phone from multiple angles, making sure they had visual evidence of everything. "This is worse than I expected," Lisa said to Martha. "I've seen cases of neglect before, but the fact that this animal has been essentially abandoned while still technically under someone's ownership, it's particularly cruel." As they were documenting the scene, a sound made everyone freeze. It was the distant rumble of a truck engine, getting closer. Emma's eyes went wide with fear. "That's Pike's truck," she whispered urgently. "He's not supposed to be home yet." Martha checked her watch. It was barely 8 o'clock, far too early for Pike to be returning from the bar. "We need to go," Martha said, her voice tight with worry. Lisa, however, stood her ground. "Actually, this might be better," she said calmly. "If he's here, we can get his side of the story, make it a more balanced piece." Emma shook her head frantically. "You don't understand. He's dangerous, especially when he's been drinking." But it was too late. Pike's truck pulled into the driveway, its headlights sweeping across the barn entrance. The engine cut off, and they heard the truck door slam. Heavy footsteps approached, and then Pike's bulk filled the doorway. He stopped short when he saw the group inside his barn, his eyes taking in the camera, the strangers, and finally landing on Emma and Martha. "What the hell is this?" Pike's voice was a low growl, dangerous and unpredictable. Emma felt Thunder tense beside her, felt the Colt's fear as acutely as her own. Lisa stepped forward, positioning herself between Pike and the others with the confidence of someone used to confronting difficult subjects. "Mr. Pike, I'm Lisa Martinez from Channel 7 News. We're doing a story on animal welfare in Millbrook County, and we've received reports about the condition of your horse." Pike's face turned red, the color creeping up from his neck. "You're on my property without permission," he said. "That's trespassing, and I want you out now." Lisa remained calm. "We're journalists documenting a matter of public interest. The treatment of animals falls under public welfare concerns." Tom kept the camera rolling, capturing Pike's angry reaction, his aggressive posture. "That horse is mine," Pike spat. "What I do with my property is my business." Emma, still standing beside Thunder, found her voice. "He's not property," she said, louder than she intended. "He's alive. He feels pain and fear and hunger just like we do. You can't just let him suffer because you're too proud to admit you can't handle him." Pike's attention swung to Emma, and the look in his eyes made Martha instinctively move closer to her granddaughter. "You again," Pike said. "I warned you to stay away." Emma lifted her chin, channeling every ounce of courage she possessed. "And I told you I wouldn't abandon him. Thunder needs help, and if you won't give it to him, then someone else has to." For a long moment, the barn was silent except for Thunder's nervous breathing and the quiet whir of the camera. Pike stood in the doorway, his fists clenched at his sides, clearly struggling between his anger and the awareness that everything he did was being recorded. Lisa seized the opportunity to press forward with her questions, her voice steady and professional despite the palpable danger in the air. "Mr. Pike, can you tell us when you last provided food and water for this animal?" Lisa asked, holding her microphone toward him. Pike's jaw worked as if he were chewing on his response. "That's nobody's business but mine," he finally said. "I feed him when I see fit." Tom adjusted the camera angle to capture both Pike's defensive posture and Thunder's obviously malnourished condition in the same frame. Jessica stepped forward with her notebook. "We've been told that this horse has been chained in this barn for several months with minimal care. Can you explain why the animal is being kept in these conditions?" Pike's face grew even redder. "I bought that horse to break and train him. He's wild and dangerous. The chain is for everyone's safety." Emma could not stay silent. "He's not dangerous," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "He's scared because you hurt him. I've been with him dozens of times and he's never once tried to hurt me. He's gentle and sweet when you treat him with kindness." Pike's eyes narrowed as he looked at Emma. "You've been trespassing on my property, feeding my horse without permission. You've got no right to interfere with how I handle my animals." Martha put a protective hand on Emma's shoulder. "That child has shown more compassion and responsibility than you've shown in all the months you've owned that horse. She's 8 years old and she understands better than you do that living things deserve to be treated with dignity." Pike took a step into the barn, and Tom instinctively moved the camera to follow him. Lisa held up a hand. "Mr. Pike, I need to inform you that this footage will be airing on tomorrow's evening news. We're going to show viewers the condition of this horse and let them decide whether this constitutes adequate care. If you'd like to make a statement for the record, now would be the time." The mention of the news broadcast seemed to give Pike pause. He was cruel and stubborn, but he was not entirely stupid. He understood that public opinion could cause him problems, even if the law would not. "Fine," Pike said, his voice tight. "If you want a statement, here it is. That horse cost me $2,000. I've got the bill of sale to prove it. I tried to train him proper, but he's got a mean streak. Won't take a saddle, won't take a bridle, nearly kicked me in the head twice. So I put him in here until he learned some respect. As for the girl, she had no business being here, and anything she did just made things worse." "How did helping him make things worse?" Emma demanded, her fear giving way to righteous anger. "He was starving and you didn't care." I gave him food and water and kindness, things you should have been giving him all along." Her voice broke on the last words, tears of frustration streaming down her face. Thunder shifted beside her, pressing closer as if trying to comfort her even in his own distress. The image was powerful, this small blonde girl with tears on her cheeks, standing beside the suffering animal she had tried to save, facing down a man 3 times her size who had caused that suffering. Tom made sure to capture every second of it. Lisa knew they had more than enough for their story, but she also sensed an opportunity to push for something more. "Mr. Pike," Lisa said, her tone shifting to something almost conciliatory, "it's clear this situation isn't working out for anyone. The horse isn't being trained, you're dealing with accusations of neglect, and now you're going to be in the news. What if there was another solution?" Pike crossed his arms. "What kind of solution?" "What if you agreed to surrender the horse to a rescue organization?" Lisa suggested. "You'd be off the hook for his care, and you could even spin it as doing the right thing. We could include that in the story, show that you ultimately made a responsible choice." Pike's expression remained skeptical, but Lisa could see she had his attention. Martha jumped in, sensing the same opportunity. "There's a horse rescue about an hour from here. I already contacted them. They'd be willing to take Thunder tonight if you'd sign him over. No charges, no legal trouble, just a clean transfer of ownership." Pike looked around at the assembled group, at the camera still recording, at Emma's tear-stained face, at Thunder standing weak and defeated in the corner. For the first time, something like doubt crossed his features. "And what do I get out of it?" Pike asked. Lisa did not miss a beat. "You get to walk away from this without being the villain. The story becomes about a community coming together to save an animal, with you doing the right thing in the end. Otherwise, the story is about a man who neglected his horse while a brave little girl tried to save it. Which version do you want on the evening news?" The calculation played out visibly on Pike's face. His pride warred with his practicality, his stubbornness against his self-interest. Finally, he let out a long breath. "Fine," he said. "Take the damn horse. I'm done with him anyway. But I want that bill of sale back. I'm not taking a financial loss on this." Martha nodded quickly. "I'll write you a check for $2,000 right now. Consider it a donation to get Thunder into proper care." She pulled out her checkbook, her hands shaking slightly as she wrote. It was a significant amount of money for her, money she had been saving for emergencies. But looking at Emma's hopeful face and Thunder's suffering form, she knew there could be no better use for it. Pike snatched the check when Martha handed it to him, examining it suspiciously before folding it and stuffing it in his shirt pocket. "Fine," he said again. "Where do I sign?" Jessica produced a simple transfer of ownership document that the rescue organization had provided just in case. Pike scrawled his signature across it without reading the details, clearly eager to be done with the whole situation. The moment the pen left the paper, Emma let out a sob of relief. Martha pulled out her phone and called the rescue organization. "They're sending a trailer right away," Martha said after a brief conversation. "They'll be here within the hour." Pike grunted and turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "That chain key is on a nail by the door," he said without looking back. Then he was gone, his truck starting up moments later and pulling away into the night. The moment Pike's truck disappeared down the road, Martha rushed to the nail by the door and grabbed the key. Her hands trembled as she approached Thunder, this suffering creature that had given her granddaughter a reason to live again. Emma stood beside the Colt, one hand resting on his neck, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath her palm. He seemed to sense that something important was happening, his ears swiveling to catch every sound. Martha knelt beside Thunder and inserted the key into the rusted padlock. It took several tries, the mechanism stiff from months of neglect and exposure to the elements. Emma held her breath, afraid that even now something might go wrong. Then, with a click that seemed to echo through the barn, the padlock opened. Martha pulled the heavy chain away from Thunder's neck, and for the first time in months, the Colt was unbound. Thunder stood perfectly still for a moment, as if unable to comprehend what had just happened. The weight he had grown accustomed to, the constant pull and restriction, was suddenly gone. Emma watched his eyes, saw the confusion give way to understanding, and then to something that looked almost like disbelief. Slowly, hesitantly, Thunder took a step forward. Then another. He walked in a small circle, his movement stiff from months of immobility, but free. Actually free. Emma laughed through her tears as Thunder continued to explore his newfound freedom, staying close to her but testing the limits of his movement. Lisa, Jessica, and Tom watched in silence, moved by the profound simplicity of the moment. This was why they did what they did, to witness these instances of justice and redemption, to document the moments when wrong was made right. The sound of another vehicle approaching broke the spell. A large truck pulling a horse trailer turned into the driveway, and Emma's heart sank, even as she knew this was necessary. The rescue organization had arrived to take Thunder to safety, to give him the medical care and rehabilitation he desperately needed. But that meant saying goodbye, and Emma was not sure she was ready for that. A woman in her 50s climbed out of the truck, followed by a younger man carrying a veterinary bag. The woman introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Winters, the founder and director of Second Chance Equine Rescue. She had kind eyes and capable hands, the bearing of someone who had spent a lifetime working with traumatized animals. When she saw Thunder, her professional composure slipped for just a moment, her face reflecting the same shock and sorrow that everyone felt when they first witnessed his condition. "Oh, you poor darling," Dr. Winters murmured, approaching Thunder slowly. The Colt, still wary of adults after his experience with Pike, tensed and backed up a step. Emma immediately moved to his side, placing a calming hand on his shoulder. "It's okay, Thunder," Emma said softly. "She's here to help." Dr. Winters smiled at Emma. "You must be the young lady who's been taking care of him. Your grandmother told me about you." Emma nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Dr. Winters' associate, who introduced himself as Marcus, began a preliminary examination of Thunder. He checked the Colt's vital signs, examined his teeth and hooves, assessed the damage from the chain and the months of neglect. His expression grew more grave with each discovery. "He's severely malnourished," Marcus said quietly to Dr. Winters. "Dehydrated, possible hoof rot from standing in waste, and these wounds from the chain are infected. We need to get him to the facility as soon as possible." Dr. Winters nodded but did not rush. She could see the bond between Emma and Thunder, could see that this goodbye needed to happen properly. She knelt down to Emma's level, just as Lisa had done earlier. "Sweetheart, I need you to know that Thunder is going to need a lot of care. Months of rehabilitation, medical treatment, proper nutrition. It's going to be a long road to recovery." Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "But he will recover, right? He'll be okay." "With time and care, yes," Dr. Winters said gently. "But I need to be honest with you. It would help his recovery tremendously if he had someone he trusted visiting him, someone who could provide continuity and emotional support during this difficult transition. Would you and your grandmother be willing to visit him at our facility?" Emma's face lit up with hope. "Really, we could visit him." Dr. Winters smiled. "As often as you'd like. In fact, I'd encourage it. You've already done so much for him. I'd hate for that relationship to end just because he's getting professional help." Martha, who had been standing nearby, stepped forward. "We'll be there," she said firmly, "as often as Emma wants to go." Dr. Winters stood and shook Martha's hand. "Then let's make this official. We'll need to document his condition before transport, get him loaded as gently as possible, and get him started on fluids and antibiotics tonight. Emma, would you like to help us lead him to the trailer?" Emma nodded eagerly. Grateful for the chance to be part of Thunder's rescue rather than just a bystander, she took hold of the makeshift lead rope that Marcus provided, and with Thunder following trustingly beside her, they walked out of the barn for the last time. The night air was cool and fresh, such a stark contrast to the stale atmosphere of Thunder's prison. The Colt lifted his head, his nostrils flaring as he took in scents he had almost forgotten: grass and earth and freedom. The loading process was slow and careful. Thunder had never been in a trailer before, and the confined space initially frightened him. But Emma stayed by his side, talking to him in that soft voice he had come to know, and eventually he stepped inside. Marcus secured him with padded restraints designed to keep him safe during transport without restricting him the way the chain had. Dr. Winters prepared an IV to begin rehydration immediately. Before they closed the trailer door, Emma stepped inside one more time. She wrapped her arms around Thunder's neck, pressing her face against his rough coat, breathing in his scent and committing it to memory. "I'll see you tomorrow," she promised. "And the day after that, and the day after that, after. You're never going to be alone again, Thunder, I promise." Thunder lowered his head and rested his muzzle on her shoulder, their familiar gesture. And Emma felt his warm breath against her neck. Martha had to gently pull Emma away so they could close the trailer. Emma stood between her grandmother and Lisa, watching as the truck pulled away into the night, carrying Thunder toward his new life. The camera had captured everything, and Lisa put a hand on Emma's shoulder. "You did an amazing thing, Emma. You saved his life." Emma shook her head. "He saved mine first," she said simply. Emma barely slept that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if Thunder was scared in his new surroundings, if he missed her, if he understood that she had not abandoned him. When morning finally came, she was dressed and ready before Martha had even finished her first cup of coffee. "Can we go see him now?" Emma asked for the third time in an hour. Martha smiled at her granddaughter's eagerness. "Let's at least wait until a decent hour, sweetheart. Dr. Winters said we could come by after 10. The news segment aired that evening, and it sent ripples through the community that no one had anticipated. The footage of Thunder's condition, combined with Emma's tearful defense of the Colt and Pike's callous responses, struck a chord with viewers across the region. The station's phone lines were flooded with calls from people wanting to help, wanting to donate to Thunder's care, wanting to support the little girl who had shown such courage and compassion. By the next morning, Second Chance Equine Rescue had received over $15,000 in donations specifically designated for Thunder's recovery. Dr. Winters called Martha with the news, her voice thick with emotion. "In 20 years of running this rescue, I've never seen anything like this," she said. "Emma's story has touched so many hearts. People want to be part of Thunder's healing journey." When Emma and Martha arrived at the rescue facility later that day, they found a transformed Thunder. He was standing in a clean, spacious stall with fresh bedding, and though he was still painfully thin, his coat had been washed and brushed until it showed hints of its true chestnut color. An IV line was still attached, delivering the fluids and nutrients his body desperately needed. But the most striking change was in his eyes. They were brighter, more alert, as if the fog of despair had begun to lift. The moment Thunder saw Emma, he nickered softly and moved to the front of his stall. Emma's face broke into a radiant smile as she approached, reaching through the bars to stroke his muzzle. "Hi, Thunder," she whispered. "I told you I'd come back." Dr. Winters joined them, a clipboard in her hand. "He's been asking for you, in his own way. Every time someone walks by, he looks up, hoping it's you. Would you like to come inside and spend some time with him?" Emma spent the next 2 hours in Thunder's stall, simply being near him. She brushed his coat with the soft grooming tools Dr. Winters provided, careful around his wounds and sore spots. She talked to him constantly, telling him about the news story, about all the people who wanted him to get better, about the future she imagined for him. Thunder listened with those intelligent eyes, occasionally nuzzling her shoulder or blowing soft breaths against her hand. Dr. Winters watched from outside the stall, making notes on her clipboard. The physical healing would take months, but she could already see the emotional healing beginning. Thunder trusted Emma completely, and that trust was extending gradually to the staff at the rescue. He allowed them to change his bandages, administer medications, and examine his wounds without the fear and aggression he had shown initially. It was all because of the foundation Emma had built during those secret visits to Pike's barn. Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Emma visited Thunder every day after school, and on weekends she spent entire afternoons at the rescue. Martha often came with her, sometimes bringing vegetables from her garden for the other horses at the facility. The staff at Second Chance welcomed them both, recognizing that Emma's presence was as vital to Thunder's recovery as any medicine they could provide. Thunder's physical transformation was remarkable. With proper nutrition, his body began to fill out, his ribs becoming less prominent with each passing week. The infected wounds from the chain healed, leaving scars that would always remind him of his suffering but no longer causing him pain. His hooves, which had been in terrible condition from standing in waste for months, were trimmed and treated by a skilled farrier. His coat grew thick and lustrous, revealing the beautiful copper color that had been hidden beneath layers of dirt and neglect. But the emotional transformation was even more profound. Thunder learned that not all humans were cruel, that touch could mean comfort rather than pain, that trust could be rewarded rather than betrayed. He began to engage with his surroundings, showing curiosity about the other horses in neighboring stalls, perking up at new sounds, even playing occasionally in the small paddock where Emma would lead him for exercise. Emma, too, was changing. The grief that had silenced her for so long had found an outlet in her dedication to Thunder. She no longer felt helpless in the face of loss and suffering. She had learned that one person, even a small one, could make a difference. Her teachers noticed that she was more engaged in class, more willing to participate and connect with her peers. She even made a presentation about animal welfare and Thunder's rescue that moved several of her classmates to tears. One Saturday afternoon, about 2 months after Thunder's rescue, Dr. Winters called Emma and Martha into her office. Emma's heart raced with worry. Was something wrong? Had Thunder suffered a setback? But when they entered the office, Dr. Winters was smiling. "Sit down, both of you," she said warmly. "I have something important to discuss." Emma perched on the edge of her chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Dr. Winters leaned forward, her eyes moving between Emma and Martha. "Thunder has made remarkable progress. Physically, he's almost completely healed. Emotionally, well, you've seen the change in him. He's become one of the most gentle, trusting horses we've ever had here." Emma smiled, proud of how far Thunder had come. "That's wonderful," Martha said. "So what happens next?" Dr. Winters took a deep breath. "That's what I wanted to talk to you about. Normally, once a horse is rehabilitated, we work to find them an adoptive home. Someone with experience, with the right facilities, someone who can provide them with a good life." Emma felt her stomach drop. Thunder was going to be adopted by someone else. She would lose him. Dr. Winters must have seen the panic in Emma's face because she quickly continued. "However, Thunder's case is unique. His bond with Emma is extraordinary, and honestly, I'm not sure he would do well being separated from her. So I wanted to ask, have you ever considered adopting him yourselves?" The question hung in the air. Dr. Winters pulled out a folder from her desk drawer and opened it to reveal architectural drawings and photographs. After the news story aired, we received more than just monetary donations. A local contractor named Bill Henderson saw Emma's story and was moved by it. He owns a construction company and he reached out to offer his services. She spread the drawings across the desk. "He wants to build proper horse facilities on your property, free of charge. A stable, a paddock, fencing, everything Thunder would need." Emma's eyes widened as she looked at the detailed plans. Martha leaned forward, studying the drawings with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "This is incredibly generous," Martha said slowly, "but I couldn't possibly accept such an expensive gift." Dr. Winters smiled. "It's not just from Bill." After he made his offer, others in the community started volunteering too. A feed store owner promised a year's supply of hay and grain. A veterinarian offered free care for Thunder's first year. Even the local high school's agricultural program wants to help with the construction as a community service project. The outpouring of support had been overwhelming, Dr. Winters explained. Emma's act of courage had inspired something in the people of Millbrook County. They had been ashamed that such neglect could happen in their community, and now they wanted to be part of making it right. They wanted to ensure that the little girl who had saved Thunder could keep him, that their story would have a happy ending. Martha felt tears welling in her eyes. She had lived in this community her whole life, had sometimes felt isolated in her grief after losing her daughter and son-in-law. But now she was seeing a different side of her neighbors, their capacity for kindness and generosity. She looked at Emma, whose face was glowing with a hope so bright it was almost painful to witness. "What do you think, sweetheart?" Martha asked, though she already knew the answer. "Can we really keep him, Grandma?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter this wonderful dream. Martha reached over and took her granddaughter's hand. "If this is what you want, if you're willing to take on the responsibility of caring for Thunder every single day, then yes, we can keep him." Emma launched herself into Martha's arms, sobbing with joy. Dr. Winters tactfully looked away, giving them their moment. The construction began the following week. Bill Henderson and his crew arrived early one Saturday morning, their trucks loaded with lumber and tools. The high school students came too, eager to be part of the project that everyone in town was talking about. Even people who had no construction skills showed up, offering to help in whatever way they could. Some brought food for the workers, others donated materials, and many simply came to watch and cheer the progress. Emma spent every free moment at the construction site, watching as the stable took shape on a cleared section of Martha's property. Thunder's future home would have a large stall with windows that let in natural light, a covered area where he could shelter from rain, and a spacious paddock where he could run and play. It was more than Emma had ever dared to hope for, and each day brought them closer to the moment when Thunder could finally come home. During this time, Emma continued her daily visits to Second Chance. She would tell Thunder all about the progress on his new home, describing every detail as if he could understand, and perhaps in his own way, he did. Thunder seemed to sense that something important was happening, that change was coming. His ears would perk up whenever Emma talked about the stable, and he would nuzzle her hand as if to say he trusted wherever she would lead him. 4 weeks after construction began, the facilities were complete. Bill Henderson walked Martha and Emma through the finished stable, pointing out features with obvious pride. "We built it to last," he said. "This structure will be here for Thunder's lifetime and beyond." The stall door had Thunder's name carved into it, a detail that made Emma's heart swell. In the tack room, volunteers had already stocked grooming supplies, blankets, and everything else Thunder might need. The day of Thunder's homecoming arrived on a bright Sunday morning. Dr. Winters personally transported Thunder in the rescue's trailer, wanting to ensure the transition went smoothly. When the trailer pulled into Martha's driveway, neighbors lined the street, many holding welcome signs they had made. It had become a community celebration, this moment when the rescued horse would finally find his forever home. Emma waited by the new paddock gate, her heart pounding with anticipation. When Dr. Winters lowered the trailer ramp and led Thunder out, Emma heard the collective gasp from the gathered crowd. Thunder had completed his transformation. He was no longer the emaciated, broken colt from that dark barn. He was a magnificent young horse, his copper coat gleaming in the sunlight, his muscles strong and defined, his head held high with dignity and health. But when Thunder's eyes found Emma in the crowd, something magical happened. All his regal bearings softened, and he pulled gently against the lead rope, eager to reach the girl who had saved him. "Doctor." Winters handed the rope to Emma with a smile. "He's all yours now," she said. Emma led Thunder through the gate into his new paddock, and the moment she released the rope, he began to move. Thunder trotted around the perimeter of the paddock, exploring his new territory, his movements fluid and joyful. Then he broke into a canter, and finally into a full gallop. The crowd watched in awed silence as Thunder ran, his hooves thundering against the earth, his mane and tail streaming behind him. This was what he was meant for. This freedom, this power, this pure expression of life. After months of being chained to a single spot, Thunder was experiencing the vast possibility of open space. Emma stood in the center of the paddock, watching him with tears of joy streaming down her face. Thunder completed several circles, running as if he were trying to make up for all the months he had lost, and then he came to a stop directly in front of Emma. His sides were heaving, his eyes bright with exhilaration. He lowered his head and pressed his muzzle against Emma's shoulder, their signature gesture, and Emma wrapped her arms around his neck. The months that followed Thunder's homecoming were filled with the quiet joy of routine. Every morning before school, Emma would go to the stable to feed Thunder and spend a few precious minutes with him. She would brush his coat until it shone, check his water, and whisper her plans for the day. Thunder would listen with patient attention, occasionally huffing warm breath against her hair in response. Those morning moments became sacred to Emma, a peaceful start to each day that grounded her in a way nothing else could. In the afternoons after school, Emma would change into her barn clothes and spend hours with Thunder. At first, she simply led him around the paddock, letting him graze while she did her homework sitting on the fence. But as the seasons changed and Thunder grew stronger, their activities expanded. Dr. Winters taught Emma the basics of natural horsemanship, techniques that relied on trust and communication rather than force. Thunder proved to be a willing student, eager to please the girl who had saved him. One spring afternoon, nearly a year after Thunder's rescue, Emma stood in the paddock with a saddle for the first time. She had spent months preparing for this moment, working with Dr. Winters and a trainer named Miguel who specialized in rehabilitating traumatized horses. Thunder had been introduced to the tack gradually, learning that these strange objects were not instruments of pain, but tools that would allow him to carry his beloved Emma. Martha watched from the fence as Emma approached Thunder with the saddle. The horse stood perfectly still, his trust in Emma absolute. She placed the saddle on his back, moving slowly and talking to him constantly. Thunder's ears swiveled back, listening to her voice, taking comfort in her presence. When Emma tightened the girth, Thunder shifted slightly, but did not protest. It was a moment of profound significance, this wild colt who had trusted no one now accepting the very thing that represented submission and control. Emma did not ride that day. The saddle was enough. A bridge crossed. But 2 weeks later, with Miguel and Dr. Winters present for safety, Emma swung herself onto Thunder's back for the first time. She sat there for only a moment before sliding off, but it was a moment that brought tears to everyone's eyes. Thunder had allowed it, had chosen to carry her, had completed his transformation from broken captive to willing partner. By summer, Emma and Thunder could be seen riding along the quiet country roads around Martha's property. They moved together with an ease that spoke of their deep connection. Emma's hands light on the reins, Thunder's steps confident and smooth. People would stop to watch them pass, this golden-haired girl on her copper horse, and many would remember the story of how they had found each other. Some would wave or call out encouragement, and Emma would wave back, proud of how far they had both come. The riding was therapeutic for Emma in ways she had not anticipated. On Thunder's back, feeling his powerful muscles moving beneath her, she felt strong in a way she had not since before her parents' death. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it no longer controlled her. She had learned that loss was part of life, but so was healing. So was love. So was the possibility of new beginnings. Thunder, too, had found his purpose. He was no longer the terrified, aggressive colt that Pike had tried to break. He was gentle but confident, calm but alert, a horse who had known the worst of humanity and chosen to trust again anyway. His scars, both physical and emotional, had become part of his story, proof of his resilience rather than marks of shame. On the anniversary of Thunder's rescue, Second Chance Equine Rescue organized a celebration. It was partly a fundraiser for the organization and partly a recognition of what Emma's courage had started. The news station that had first covered the story did a follow-up segment showing Thunder in his beautiful new home, healthy and happy. They interviewed Emma, who spoke with the confidence of a girl who had found her voice and her purpose. "People ask me why I risked so much for a horse I barely knew," Emma said to the camera, standing beside Thunder in the paddock. "But I think Thunder and I recognized something in each other from the very first moment. We were both trapped, both suffering, both forgotten. Saving him helped me save myself." She reached up to stroke Thunder's neck, and the horse lowered his head to rest against her shoulder. "He taught me that healing is possible, that trust can be rebuilt, that even when the world seems cruel, there is always hope." The segment ended with footage of Emma and Thunder cantering across a meadow, the late afternoon sun turning everything golden. It was an image of freedom and joy, a stark contrast to the dark barn where their story had begun. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured into Second Chance, allowing them to rescue dozens more horses. Emma began receiving letters from children across the country who had been inspired by her story, who wanted to help animals in their own communities. Martha watched her granddaughter blossom into a passionate advocate for animal welfare. Emma started a blog documenting Thunder's recovery and their daily life together. She gave presentations at schools and community centers about recognizing and reporting animal abuse. She volunteered at Second Chance on weekends, helping to socialize and care for new rescues. The quiet, withdrawn child who had arrived at Martha's door 2 years earlier had transformed into a force for positive change. But through it all, the core of Emma's world remained her bond with Thunder. No matter how busy she became, no matter what other activities filled her schedule, she never missed their morning routine. Those moments in the stable, just the two of them, were where Emma felt most herself. Thunder was her confidant, her friend, her reminder of what was possible when love and determination met suffering and need. On quiet evenings, Emma would sometimes sit in the paddock watching Thunder graze, remembering that first morning when she had found him chained in the darkness. She would think about how close they had both come to remaining trapped in their respective prisons of grief and neglect. And she would feel a profound gratitude, not just for Thunder's presence in her life, but for the journey they had taken together. Thunder would lift his head from the grass and look at her, and in his dark eyes Emma could see the same gratitude reflected back. They had saved each other. They had chosen trust over fear, hope over despair, love over loneliness. And in doing so, they had discovered that the strongest bonds are forged not in moments of joy, but in the quiet courage of reaching out to another suffering soul and whispering, "You are not alone." The whisper of an 8-year-old girl had indeed changed a wild colt's heart forever, but it had also changed her own, and in that transformation, both had found their way home.